When I rode the Speed 400 from Triumph, there were two things which I thought could improve on the Scrambler 400X. Now, I have the Scrambler and one thing has actually improved, the other one, not so much. I had been dying to ride the Triumph Scrambler 400X and today finally I have the chance, I have the bike to myself, I've ridden it and I will tell you in this video what is different compared to the Speed in terms of design, ergonomics, how it is to ride and if it justifies the price or not. All of this will be covered in this review, so stay tuned and let's begin before I faint out of excitement. Now the Scrambler 400X boasts of the same fit and finish quality that the Speed had and it is very well built. You find that the quality of the paint, the finishing of all the parts are done very well and I cannot fault anything in terms of the fit and finish right here. The design changes compared to the Speed 400, there are a few, but in this red color what I noticed was if you're looking at the bike from the front, then it does look like the Speed from a distance. Obviously when you get closer you see the differences, and especially considering that these bikes can have similar accessories onto them, so it can sometimes get a little hard to differentiate the Speed and the Scrambler from afar. But now coming on to the changes, well, first of all you'll notice that this has a bigger 19-inch tire at the front and the alloy design has also changed because of that. The suspension setup is same but you have longer travel because obviously this is a Scrambler. At the front the headlamp unit is the same but it does get a covering now to save it from any kind of rocks or anything flying if you're going on trail rides. However, the headlamp performance is not as great as it should have been. Now further back, the handlebar is a little different. You have this crossbar in the middle. You also get these guards on top, and on the side you will notice that on this side of the motorcycle you have a different side panel. You have grips on the tank. Also there's a metal bash plate which is good if you are going on roads like these where the rocks can easily fly. Over at the back you will notice that this has a split seat setup and the seat cushion is actually pretty good. I did not have any complaints. We could not test it with a pillion. We will do that later on, and this gets a split grab rail instead of a single unit that was seen on the Speed 400. Then you have the tires which are 17-inch, but this is a 140 section tire which is slightly slimmer than that of the Speed, and obviously you get a different dual purpose rubber on these alloy wheels. And last but not the least is the twin barrel exhaust that the Scrambler gets, and it does change the sound of the motorcycle as well, which I will give you a sample of just now. The ergonomics of the Scrambler have changed compared to the Speed for obvious reasons. Now, the first thing you'll notice is the higher seat height of 835 mm, which is about 40 mm more than the Speed. And for me, that's not a problem. For shorter riders, that might be a bit of an issue, but the saving grace is that the bike is very slim, so you can easily get your feet down. At least 1 foot you can put down, so it should not be too big of a problem. The ground clearance has gone up to 195 mm, which is perfect. I have had no complaints with the ground clearance. In terms of sitting, this is still a very neutral motorcycle. The handlebar, yes, feels a little wider, and when you're turning the bike, you do feel like you have to deal with a bigger area that you have to move around. But otherwise, I found the position of the foot pegs, the handlebar, absolutely great. One thing which I did not like with the Speed 400 was when you're sitting and if you have your foot like this, then the back of my foot was touching the rear foot peg. Not so in this motorcycle. You can see I clearly have enough clearance, so that is not a problem, especially when you're changing gears. The weight of this motorcycle has also gone up. It's now 185 kilograms, and that is one thing which does come out and which is apparent when you're moving this bike at slower speeds. So that is one thing you will have to contend with, but that increased weight comes with all the additional equipment that this bike packs. The seat, like I mentioned, is very comfortable, and there is enough room for a pillion, and there is also a grab handle for them to hold on to. So I think this will be a good city bike if you carry your friends around with you or go on journeys with a pillion. The instrument cluster up front is basically the same unit that we saw in the Speed 400. It's a semi-digital unit, works well. The only addition is that because of switchable ABS, you have that option now in the menu. Otherwise, it's basically the same as before. So because of the revised ergonomics and more space available, the first thing that I mentioned, which the Speed 400 lacked a little, was the fact that it felt very compact for someone who's taller, maybe 6 feet or taller. This one kind of takes care of that because obviously you have a longer suspension travel, so even if you're a little on the heavier side, then this can accommodate your weight. You have more space, so you won't feel as cramped on this motorcycle as you would have felt on the Speed 400. So now if you want something more compact, you can go for the Speed 400. If you want something a little more roomy, then the Scrambler is there for you. Now let's talk about the engine, which is the same TR series single cylinder 400cc liquid cooled engine that you find in the Speed 400. The calibration is also the same, which means that you have a lot of torque low down, and that is something that you need, especially if you're going off-road. When you are crawling and when you are saddling, you would want fine throttle control. You don't want the bike to jerk a whole lot, and this does comply with your input. Even if you're in first or second gear, as long as the speed is correct, I was easily able to manage the throttle and not unsettle the bike too much, whether I want to slow down a little or accelerate out of a tight spot. So that way the engine does comply and does help the bike take on the tough terrains. And I initially had a little bit of doubt whether the same state of tune of the engine would work with the Scrambler, but surprisingly, in whatever little soft roading that we did, it does work really well. One thing that Triumph has changed is the engine braking provided by this motorcycle to comply a little more, especially when you are, like I said, on trails. Then you would not always want to rely on brakes completely. You use engine braking to slow yourself down, and at that time this bike, again, in a very steady and in a very nice manner, comes to a slower speed or comes to a complete halt. Out on the road, this bike again has about 39 horsepower, 37.5 Newton meters, which is enough to do highway speeds, which is enough to get it up to speeds really quickly. Because of the additional weight and a bigger front tire, the dynamics have changed a little, which means that while the Speed 400 feels very comfortable to reach the 120 kmph mark, this one will go up to 100, and then the climb becomes a little bit slower as compared to the Speed. But in normal riding, you will not find this bike lacking in terms of power and pace. The front tire, yes, because it's bigger, you do have to work the handlebar a little bit more compared to the Speed, but it's not something that will change your buying decision. I think it's not as drastic. We've been through some really tight and twisty roads while climbing up this mountain, and the bike has been pretty fantastic, and it did take very tight lines, changed directions very easily. So that way it's really good, and I don't think you will find that this bike is cumbersome to ride. Yes, the Speed still has a little bit of an edge when compared to this bike in terms of being nimble. Now what Triumph has done is, while you have the same suspension setup, you have a longer travel, which means that when you're going on trails, you have a little more to play with. And I must say that the suspension is a highlight on this motorcycle. Not only does it work really well on trails and on bad roads, it also works really well on roads. Why do I say that? Well, because you do feel the undulations, but not in a bad way. You feel as if you're getting good feedback from the road, while the ride is actually relatively comfortable. If you're going at high speeds, I'm sure you must have also encountered when you're going maybe on a highway or on a flyover, and then suddenly there is this small patch or small pothole which comes out of nowhere and it completely unsettles the bike. Well, not so with the Scrambler. This one goes over those sudden surprising potholes with ease without unsettling the bike. So that way it feels a lot more safe, it feels a lot more confident, and like I said, that feedback that you get from the suspension of the road is absolutely amazing. The brake setup has also changed slightly, so you have a radial caliper at the front and a slightly bigger 320mm disc brake, and you can switch off the ABS for the rear tire, which is great. And I did enjoy a lot when I switched off the traction control, switched off the rear ABS, helped me slide the bike and have some proper scram fun that you would want on a bike like this. The front brake is a little more progressive than the Speed 400, which is good, but out on the road it does feel like it takes a little bit longer to come to a halt or to stop. The Speed 400 had sharper brakes. This one is a bit more gradual, but once again completely capable of bringing this bike to a halt. Now, the second thing that I wanted Triumph to make better on the Scrambler was the vibrations that you get. In the Speed 400, the moment you go past 5000 RPM, you would notice a lot of vibrations. And sadly, that is the case here as well. They have done some tuning to, weigh the handlebar a little differently, add these rubber foot pegs, but it still does not make an appreciable difference. I think it is slightly different. You do get vibration in different parts at different speeds. So for example, I noticed as you're climbing up speeds, you will get a lot of vibrations through your seats, but once you're sitting at about 6000 RPM, the vibrations move down to the foot pegs. So that vibration issue is still there, is still something that Triumph has to work on. But the saving grace, once again, is the fact that below 5000 RPM also you have enough torque, enough speed that you can ride this motorcycle on almost all occasions and not encounter those vibrations. Below that 5000 mark, this is a buttery smooth engine, one that you really want to work with, one that you really want to engage with your throttle, with your clutch, with the gear changes, and that way it is a very tactile motorcycle, which I really appreciate. If you don't go off-roading, don't buy the Scrambler 400X over the Speed 400. Well, that is what I thought I would be saying by the end of this review, but surprisingly, the Scrambler 400X is equally as good on-road as it is for trail rides like these. I am actually impressed by how well this feels on roads, how easy it is to manage the lovely engine, the more stable nature of the suspension. In cities like Mumbai, Pune, or even Delhi, you have some really terrible patches of road, and this bike feels at home on those conditions as much as it does on soft roading terrains like these. So what Triumph has done is basically it has made two brilliant products, each with their own USPs and each suiting the needs of a specific user. If you want something more compact, you have the Speed 400. If you want something more nimble, that is the choice. But if you want something a little more fun, a little more roomy, then the Scrambler 400X is definitely good. It justifies the 30-odd thousand rupees extra that you pay over the Speed 400, and whether you buy the Speed or the Scrambler, I think you cannot make a wrong choice. And with that, we have come to the end of this review. If you liked all the information that we provided, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel if you have not done so. This is Akash Paul signing off for now. I'm not really too energetic right now, but I do want to ride the bike a little more. So maybe I'll go do that. Bye-bye.